That's what I might do.
Recording in progress.
Does that mean it's live? All right. Well, good evening. I'd like to thank those who are here with me in person and those that are online with us. My name is Cindy Spillane. I'm the Executive Director for the Daybreak Community Association. And we're gathered here tonight to review the 2025 proposed budget for the Master Association, as well as the proposed assessments and budget for the various BSAs, benefited service areas that we have. So I also want to take a moment to thank my team members, the Budget and Finance Committee, and the Service Area Committee members. Everybody had a role and a place in putting this budget together. Although the budget presentation is relatively short, and those who know me, you know I ramble, so I'll try to keep it short for you. It took months to put all of these budgets together. And so today you just get a very brief introductory view of all of the work that went in. And I just felt that it was important to acknowledge our homeowner volunteers who put in a lot of time and effort on this with us. And of course, the team members who also put a lot of time and effort into this. So we're going to break this up into two sections. The first section is going to be about the Master Association because that impacts us all. And then the last half of the presentation is going to be about the benefited service areas. So we're just going to start with some basics. One moment, I'm having a little bit of trouble with my clicker. So now I have Josh as my clicker. Some of the initial things that come up, and in case we have any first-time residents, first-time association, living in an association or first-time homeowner, one of the questions that we often get as the management team are, where do my assessments go and what do they cover? So in general, the association is a business. And we have to pay the business expenses of the association, and that's why we have assessments. But unlike a normal routine business, you as our homeowners are the association. And so we want to ensure and make sure that you are provided detailed information, meetings such as this one that will go over the budget and cost and expenses. And we try to break it down into bite-sized chunks. So when you're new to Daybreak, it's quite the little onion, I like to say. It has many, many layers and I love them, but sometimes it makes me cry. So we break it down into departments to try to help make it a little bit more digestible and easy to understand. The handout that you got when you came in, or which is posted online or a link in the chat box. Okay, for those of you online, what you have here is an itemized breakdown. What we're going to view in the slideshows is a summary of each section of the financials and the budget. But in here, it breaks down each of the individual line items for the Department 1 operating budget, which is where most all of our general expenses come from. The first column shows the proposed annual 2025 budget for that line item. The next is the budget, and then the change between the 2024 and 2025 budgets. And then as an interest we've found over the years, our homeowners want to know, how much does that line item cost me? So in this handout, you also have what each line item costs per individual homeowner per month. And it's based on, for 2025, the projected 9,530 units that we expect to have online by June in 2025. 2024 was based on the then budgeted June number of 9,062 units. And then the last column here is the change between the two unit cost counts. And then there's a short narrative at the end to try to explain some of this, because I don't expect you to remember everything that I say tonight. I won't either. So we'll just look at that together if we need to later. Clicker. Also, just as some little general housekeeping items about how the financials and the budget works. Each section, as I was talking about, each department was on the other slide. Now each section of the financials, you have your revenue section and then your administrative costs, contract costs, various things that fall into the different departments within your financial and your budgets. One of the things that we also like to do for transparency as CCMC as well as the board is, even though on-site services, which is staffing costs, is included in the overall administrative section, we call it out as its own line item because we want everyone to understand and see what that is about. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so as we go through the next few slides, we're just going to highlight some items in the various department or sections, like revenues first, and then we'll go to administrative, and just call out a few things that we want to make sure that you're noticing. Later on, we'll have questions and answers. So if I don't touch on something you're curious about, please feel free to ask during that time. Or if after the meeting, you know, digesting the handout and you're looking at things and you think of something later, just give us a holler or send me an email and we'll be happy, you know, to address it. So don't think tonight is your only opportunity to ask questions about our budget. So on our next slide, we're going to just talk about a few of the highlights in the revenue section. So a key element is how many new units can we expect to come online. The number of new units is very helpful because it's that many more homes helping to share in the expenses of the association. And so it's really important that we get that as close as possible to what the actuals are. And so for 2025, LHM, our developer, has told us to anticipate 360 units. Another unique item for Daybreak that most associations don't have the benefit of, we have 3 apartment communities who pay a pro rata of the base assessment. And when you look at your handout, you'll notice that it provides a significant source of revenue to the HOA. So what that means is that revenue helps offset your assessment, because it's another way of people bringing money into Daybreak that will pay the expenses of the association. They only pay a pro rata amount of the base assessment because their individual apartments provide their own pools and fitness and all of that. So all they're allowed to use are the parks and Ochre Lake and watercourse. Nothing that requires Key C access or anything can they get into. But that provides a huge benefit to you as homeowners on helping us to offset your assessment increases. The other thing that I want to talk about that typically has a very negative impact on a budget, or I call it a contra revenue account, because it's listed up in the revenue section, but it doesn't provide money. It detracts from the overall net income received. And that's the bad debt line item. And so we always want to make sure that there is a line item and an amount reserved for bad debt, because sometimes people fall on unfortunate circumstances. They may have to file bankruptcy or something, and so those funds become uncollectible. So we budget on what we fully bill everyone, but then the bad debt offsets a small percentage of what we may not collect. So that way we always ensure that we are collecting enough money to pay our expenses. In Daybreak, we're very fortunate that as one of our services, we provide internet through CenturyLink. One of the contractual obligations of CenturyLink in that is that the association can request that they suspend service for delinquent assessments, which has helped keep us at an extremely low collection and bad debt ratio. When economies are hard and tough like they are now, a lot of associations really suffer financially because the last things people pay are assessments. And we still have bills to pay to keep everything up and running. The internet helps make sure that we are not too adversely impacted by that. The other item is our reserve contribution. Again, that is typically up in the revenue section. In your handout, moved it a little bit, but it's typically up there. And again, it's a contra revenue in that it doesn't add revenue, it takes away. So it's not an expense, but you're paying yourselves, right? So our reserve contribution goes into its own separate bank account. It's not commingled with operating funds. And it is money set aside to maintain all of the assets of the association's replacement costs, reserve expenditures, not routine daily repairs, that's in operating. But if we need to replace play equipment or something like that, that would come out of your reserves. If we add a new play area, then that would come out of operating because we're bringing something out, and that would be a project that we'll talk about a little bit later on as we go through. And then another item, again, that not every association has the benefit of is something called prior year surplus. And so prior year surpluses are a result of when you have a budgeted year and you have expenses planned or projects planned to occur in that year, and either the project doesn't happen or it comes in less than anticipated in the budget, or expenses come in less than anticipated in the budget, because our budgets are always budgeted to net zero. We only ask for the amount of money we expect to expend. So when things don't line up perfectly, you can end up with a surplus or a deficit on the bad side of things. Fortunately, we have had a few years of surpluses since we started in 2004. And so what we do with those as the board of directors makes the decision, those prior year surplus funds are used for projects, so they don't cost you out-of-pocket dollars. You've already paid that. And it's also used to offset expenses in the current year so that it helps reduce the impact those increases might have on your assessment. So you'll find out in a little bit, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but in 2025, we are utilizing prior year surplus for both projects as well as to reduce the overall impact of the increases we face for 2025. This is just another way of looking at the overall revenue section. Over the years, we've learned that some people like the words, other people prefer graphs. And so this is just a way of showing the things that we kind of just talked about and how they impact our budget. I do want to point out that telecommunity, and it has a little asterisk there, looks like it's a significant amount, but there's also the exact same expense down below. What that is that's the $33 that you pay in your assessment comes in as revenue, and then it immediately goes out as a $33 expense per unit where we pay the bill for CenturyLink. So it is a net zero impact on the budget. Our other line item, or other income rather line item, again, Daybreak is fortunate we have some of that. We talked about apartments up there. So the other revenue are the minuscule little items that you'll see itemized out, like, garden plot rentals, design review fees, things such as that nature, the DCA, BSA management fee that our benefited service areas pay to help offset the salary for their designated benefited service area manager. So those little things. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, and this was a topic in this year's Budget and Finance Committee meeting when we were reviewing the budget, one of the times we were reviewing the budget, sanctions and fees. So sanctions and fees are nothing that we want to rely on, right? Those are fines and penalties for people who are not complying, keeping their yard mowed or things such as that. We never want that to be any sort of a significant source of revenue. We don't want to plan on homeowners not complying. And for any of you that might be in a situation that you have a letter or something, the letter says you have 10 days to respond. That doesn't mean you have 10 days to fix it or paint your house or whatever it is. But if you get in touch with us within that 10 days and let us know, hey, I can take care of X, Y, and Z in this time frame, we note your account, we just check back with you on those benchmark dates. So That's not something we ever want to do. Those fines are a last resort. Probably a little more than y'all wanted to know, but I just wanted to bring that up because it was really important to the Budget and Finance Committee that that number wasn't of any significance, because we never want anyone to think you only fined me because you're having a shortfall in your budget. It's never about that. So now our next line item, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about reserves, all right, because they impacted the master budget as well as all of the BSA budgets significantly. So the first diagram on the screen is from the reserve study that was conducted in 2021 with a site visit. And by industry standard, you have a new site visit every 3 years. So the bottom is a screenshot of our updated study that we just had done and got back a draft in September, which will begin in 2025. As you can see, they're very different, right? They use very different methodologies. The top one, the one that's the outgoing reserve study, uses a percent funded methodology. And so again, per industry best practice, an association wants to be at least at 70% funded, because that puts you in a good financial rating of not expecting a special assessments for not funding properly, right? And as you can see, we were darn close back then. And this one, so let me step back for a moment. The way I look at the differences between these studies is the top one, the one from 2021, is more on an accrual basis. A little bit for everything goes into a bucket, you know, for a long term over 30 years, right? The new reserve study is more on a cash flow basis and doesn't give you a percent funded. It just simply says, expect to spend this in this year, so you need to be collecting this in these years so that you can make sure you have enough money. And in the overall report, it showed the Daybreak critical year, I believe, as 2041. And what that means is between now and 2041, we really need to pay attention to this and make sure that our funding is adequate to make sure we never get into a negative area. Now, we're still working on the draft of this. So when we got the original draft in September, they wanted us to have a $1.4 million annual contribution. All right. And in 2024, we were contributing $812,000 or something like that. It's on your sheet. So what we do when we get a reserve study back, we dissect it. We go through every single line item in it. And when I say we, it's the management, it's also the board, and it's the Budget and Finance Committee. This is one of Scott Sherman's favorite things to do, is dissect our reserve study over the last several years, and he's very, very familiar with it. And so as we go through and dissect it, we found some areas that needed to be added. We found some things that needed to be removed. We found items that it said needed to be replaced this year, and we think it should be replaced based on current condition and what we've done recently in a different year, whether we moved it up sooner to be replaced than they had, or whether we pushed it back. So as we went through all of those, we're estimating our change will make their new annual 2025 contribution around 1.2 something. We won't know that until we get all that back. And so we need to still proceed with our 2025 budget. So what we are projecting to, or proposing to fund our reserves at for 2025 is $933,800. All right, so again, that's less than what they're recommending. However, it is over $100,000 more than we're putting in 2024. So we are increasing it. And then what the board is also doing, instead of getting an updated site visit study every 3 years, because we're continually growing and adding new amenities, they're going to get it done every 2 years. And so that way, as the economies change, instead of waiting 3 years, we'll be able to absorb those changes more quickly. And we'll be able to increase in 2026, 2027, and 2028 moving forward with really up-to-date information to make sure that we never end up in the red. So this is something that the Budget and Finance Committee and the board and the management team will be looking at very closely every year, especially during budget season. So that 933 that we're doing in 2025 will definitely be increasing every single year to make sure we're adequately funded. But it's just, and we got throughout the whole cycle, you know, with all of our parks, we have millions of dollars worth of equipment out there. So you're correct, it's not about painting townhomes or things like that, but it's just an overall accumulation of the planned expenses from 2025 until that year and the contributions. So it's just a cumulative impact. Once the reserve study is finalized, just like all of our reserve studies, they will be posted online, and then you can see the itemization as to what they're saying at which year. But right now we've got some things moving around, and I don't want to give you bad information if we move something. But no, that is a very, very good question. One of the things that I just wanted to bring up at this point is even though we've added new units, we are contributing the 933,800, not the 1.4. The increase between 2024 and 2025, even with our 9,000 plus homes contributing, that's roughly a 70-cent impact on your 2025 assessments. Now, it's not one line item. Every single line item, every single department, and every single budget is what makes up what your assessment needs need to be. But it's just, again, it's just an item that shows how the impact is. Since you were bringing up BSAs, again, we'll talk about them at the end, but think about this increase is 70 cents a month with 9,000 people sharing $100,000. The BSAs were also impacted with updated studies, but they had a few additional things impact them we'll talk about. So imagine if you only had 14 or 24 people in a BSA or 100 people to help make up that difference. It's a lot more than 70 cents per unit for them. So it's all kind of relative. One of my favorite things to do when I talk about reserves, and if you've attended one of these before, you know, unfortunately, I do not have new material because, well, it just doesn't change. So when you're looking or thinking about reserves, I want you to think about reserves in two components. You have your annual contribution, right? And then you actually have your fund balance. That's the money in your bank account, all right? And when I was originally talking about that 70%, which is what we've worked on for the last 20 plus years and is, you know, an industry norm, we've always looked at it that way, right? But if you have a fund balance that's less than the 70%, and you're not contributing over 70% annually, you're never going to catch up, right? So for the Master Association, we are in a much better place than a lot of the BSAs are. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understands when you're thinking about reserves and you see that annual contribution line item, it's not just about that one line item. It also impacts how much money do you have in the bank. So some of you will see, and we have had in the past as the Master Association, additional reserve contribution line item. And you'll notice we didn't add that this year as well because we think we're in a good place with the 933,800. The additional reserve contribution line item is specifically designed as a visual aid to show our residents that, okay, we're contributing X, and your annual contribution is never going to go away. You're always going to be contributing something for reserves every year, all right? The additional contribution for reserves is a key indicator that you're building your fund balance. So in addition to getting your annual contribution up to where it needs to be, we are still having to build up your fund balance because it's not quite there yet. So I just think that reserves are very, very important for the master as well as the individual BSAs. So I just really wanted to take a few moments and talk about this in a little bit more detail to make sure that it is something that makes sense to everybody. And, you know, as things age, we all get older, you have to start replacing them sooner. And that's why you really want your reserves to be properly funded. And as tough as assessment increases can be, how much more tough would an unexpected special assessment be? You know, hopefully with assessment increases, you can put them into your budget and you can plan the next year and you have time to adapt. If you're ever in a situation for a special assessment to take care of painting a couple of buildings or re-roofing something, those special assessments could be devastating. But as I said, as our components get older, you really want to pay attention to things, which also reminds me that Daybreak is 20 years old this year. I don't know if you all know that or not, but this is our 20th anniversary. So I'm going to take a few seconds here and make a shameless plug for our annual meeting that's coming up on November 13th. It will be held here at the Daybreak Community Center in the gymnasium. Now, unlike this meeting and past annual meetings, it's not going to be me up here chatting at you or other people just chatting at you. Our 20th anniversary annual meeting is going to be fun. We're having some event stuff, entertainment. There's going to be things for you to do. Not one chair for any of you to sit in. It's going to be an open house style. You can walk around, enjoy yourself. We do need to conduct a little bit of business. So up on the stage in the gym, we'll have a couple of guest speakers that will only interrupt you for maybe 5 minutes at a time, take care of our business, announce our board member candidate winner. So if you haven't voted for your board member, please make sure you do. Josh, when does that close? So voting closes November 11th. So you should have gotten an email that gives you a link for you to vote. So please make sure that you do that. A lot of voting this year, I know. So I hope you all can take a few minutes to join us on November 13th at our annual meeting, because it really should be a lot of fun. Okay, sorry, back to business. So again, reserves, I'm harping on it, I know. It's just one of the most key elements to ensure your financial health of your service area or an association in general. So now we're going to move from our revenue category, and we're going to kind of go over some highlights in the sections of the budget. So we're going to talk about administrative section, and we're not going to highlight every single item. I'm just going to pull out a few things in the different categories up there or section totals that I just want to bring to your attention. So under administrative, as I said, on-site services is a line item underneath that category section. And in 2025, the on-site services, we've added 3 new positions. One is for maintenance, one is for design review, and one is for community standards. And then listed in Department 8's itemized budget, which you'll have online once it's approved, is a position that we've been asked for in many years worth of surveys, is a fitness and wellness manager. So everybody wants, or a number of people really want, a robust fitness and wellness program here at the community center with the equipment and the spaces that we have available. Currently, our current fitness supervisor only is budgeted to work 10 hours a week, and that really just allows her to find instructors to do the classes that we have. It does not provide any opportunity or time to really be aggressive and grow the program. So we're really excited. Thank you for all of the survey comments. We know it's been a number of years, but we're finally able to try to put this into action next year. So we're really, really excited about that. A couple of other things I think that we had under administrative that I wanted to call out. You'll notice, I believe, a significant decrease under the professional fees item in your handout. That was decreased mostly due to, we would contract with a architectural firm called UDA that would help us with the design review committee when we had really complicated applications. People are adding an addition or making structural changes, changing drainage, things that really need a professional view. Well, we've reduced that down to hardly anything because we don't think we're going to need them with the new addition of that DRC position that I was speaking of that we're adding in this budget. So what we took out of professional fees is helping to offset the actual new salary line item that we are adding for that position. So we're really excited to be able to save some money and help us get a position that I think will benefit a large number of homeowners who have been asking for this for a very long time. So I'm really excited about that. Our next section that we want to talk about is under contract services. And so in 2024, we bid out the landscape contract for the 2025, 26, and 27 cycle. And in that, we changed some of the ways that things are going to be billed for. So Daybreak, if you haven't noticed, is huge. All right. And so doing things like a normal association doesn't really work well on all things for us. So we needed to change the way we were doing our landscape contracts. So in the landscape contracts, they could bill us for labor for things, and they were responsible for irrigation part fixes from a certain point down to the drip line areas, right? And so when landscape contractors came in and to bid on it, it was really hard to bring new people in because they had no idea how much they were going to have to plan to spend on parts, right? And so we've also discovered that, you know, maybe a landscape contractor didn't replace a part when we would have wanted it replaced because it's not functioning as efficiently as we would want it, right? So we've changed it around so that in this new contract, they can bill us for irrigation parts, but they cannot bill us for labor during our regular business hours. Obviously, if we call them for an after-hours emergency, they get to bill us for labor for that. But we're really excited to see how this change works in this next budget season. You know, there's been a few times where I've had some labor charges and was like $65, and the item that they fixed was like $5. So we really think that the switch will ultimately save us some money. However, in our irrigation line item, repair line item, we did increase it to make sure we were appropriately prepared in case it went the other direction. So that's kind of the key elements under the contract services. I'm just checking my notes to see if I rambled too much about irrigation and am forgetting something that I wanted to say. Nope, I think that's it. Oh, I lied. There is one other thing under contract services. We've added a new contract for an independent third-party park equipment inspection. That was hard to say. And what that does is it's an independent licensed playground equipment inspection company will come out and inspect all of our park equipment once a year. This is greatly anticipated and will be a benefit to what our in-house maintenance teams do. So they're out there looking at them constantly and maintaining them, but this provides that added certification inspection level to ensure that everything is up to the appropriate requirements and standards and everything. It's just another safe measure for our kiddos and adults, you know, who like to play on our play equipment as well. So we're excited about adding that in. Our next section is insurance, which we all know you have to have. Nobody wants, but we have to have it. And it is increased dramatically, especially for us in our general liability and our excess or umbrella liability policies for the Master Association. The bigger that we get, the more areas of exposure, all of that is taken into account. So, you know, this really significantly hit us in some of the specific items. Some of our insurance line items, you know, stayed pretty stagnant. So it ended up in an increase, but it was a little painful on that one. And everyone, I don't know if you know or not, but insurance rates are impacted for an association just like they're impacted for you as an individual. What's going on around the country and around the world impacts our rates here. So the insurance companies are global, and if they take a big loss over here, they're going to make up that money somewhere, and it's in your renewal premiums. We do bid out our insurance every single year. We work with a broker, and they bid it out to multiple providers. We only use A-rated providers. We don't want to have insurance with somebody that's not going to pay out if there is a claim. But they do shop it and bid it out, and it probably goes through a 90, 100-day process for them to bid it out before they come down to the best 3 options, and then they present those to the board, and the board makes a decision on that. In our other expense category, in your handout, what is listed in there is the interest for the loan we have to build the maintenance shop and merge the remaining balance for the DCC pool into one loan. So that's what's in that line item. And then our parts and supplies, we did see a little bit of a savings in the overall category. You know, our maintenance guys are shopping, looking for things, you know, not just accepting prices. So they're doing a really good job of trying to make sure when they have to buy things, they're getting the best deal for everybody. So they were able to find a little bit of savings for us in 2024. In the repairs and maintenance section, some of the significant increases was signage, also vandalism, irrigation repairs, community garden expenses, those areas. Community gardens, we have a few projects that are planned. So we want to make sure that we keep those up, which is really exciting because over the last couple of years, John, one of our team members, has kind of been overseeing the community gardens, and he's done some various repairs and upgrades throughout them, and participation has increased every year. So we haven't gotten new community gardens, but we're getting less and less gardens with open plots every year. So that's really good, and we want to make sure that we keep that amenity looking good and special for everybody. Vandalism is a big one. We have really worked hard at the board's direction to make sure that we're adequately booking vandalism under vandalism. Right? We want to make sure every invoice that comes through that repair was a result of vandalism is coded to vandalism. Historically, we haven't been that great about dissecting those out that way. And so right now, we have about $11,000 that we've paid out. So again, if you see something, say something. Because when we know who the culprit is, we will go after them, and we have gotten reimbursement. That's why it's only $11,000. We've been able to catch people a few times and get reimbursement for the repairs that were made. So if you see something, you live nearby, you have a Ring doorbell, you happen to have some good footage, let us know. And if you're willing to share, and we will go after them, because otherwise you're paying for it in your assessments. So if you see something, please let us know. Don't confront the people. I don't want any confrontations on anything. Just let us know so that we can try to hunt them down and get reimbursement for you. Our signage increased because there is a code, I guess, with South Jordan City that we found out that the Paseo homes, if you live on a Paseo, you're going to know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it's not going to make any sense. But the Paseos need to have address signs so that they can be found easily if there's an emergency vehicle, or even more importantly, the pizza guy needs to be able to find where people live, right? And so we have hundreds of Paseos that have been built since the beginning of time of Daybreak. And so there's a huge amount of money. That's what that changes, because we have 300 plus signs that we have to get made and installed in the Paseos next year. The good news is the developer is ensuring that as the builders design and build Paseo homes, the builders are now responsible to put the signs in as they build them. But some of the builders that built some of the original areas aren't here, so there's no one to go back to. So the association needs to be in compliance. And so that's what that increase is for. Taxes, we all love taxes. So yay. Whereas interest rates on our interest income and our investments on your reserve fund accounts, your surplus operating money, we invest those so that you earn interest on that, and they keep growing. It's been wonderful. I don't know, my retirement account, I may actually get to retire. I don't know, it depends on what happens in the next little while. But everything's gone up and it's been awesome. But because an association pays taxes on non-assessment type revenue, such as interest income, we have to pay out about 33% of what we make in interest income back out in taxes. So the increase in taxes is about to cover that as well. We're also, today we got our tax bill for the maintenance facility. We're still working through getting that listed as a common area. So we're going to have to pay another $23,000. That's not in the 2025 budget because I thought we had completed that process, but they're still arguing with us. So we'll have that lovely little $23,000 that we'll have to pay. Yeah. For property taxes. So for an association, our common areas are tax exempt or have, minuscule amounts due, because each of your homes value take into account all of the common areas and amenities of Daybreak. So you're already paying taxes through your own homes. So by taxing an association, it can be considered double taxation. And so that's why we work really hard to make sure our common areas are transferred over and they go from being commercial areas to common areas. And whenever you build a structure like a maintenance facility, it's not as clear cut for the taxing authority to understand. It's a common element. It takes a few minutes to figure that out. Yes, Ron.
The income tax includes interest earned on the.
Yep. The interest earned on reserves goes back into the reserves. Interest earned on operating items go into the operating, but we only pay taxes on the one GL code under operating for both. It's a very good question. Thank you for asking. Our utilities went up a little bit, even though we found some savings in our culinary water usage. So that went down a little bit. Our electric is going up. If you haven't heard, I'm really sorry to share with you, but Rocky Mountain Power has put in, originally they put in for a 30% increase, but they've come back and said they would accept 18%. So our budget includes a projected 18% increase on electric costs. So I'm going to take a break and get a drink really quick. So much for making this short, right, guys? I have not heard of an outcome yet, but I think we're closer to the 18 than the 30. But don't hold me to that. This next slide that we have here, these are our other departments. If you remember on one of the first couple of screens, we listed all of the departments that make up our Daybreak operating costs. Each department has its own individual budget workbook. And then they all roll up into one big budget workbook to make our overall net zero budget. So what we did here, each one of these has similar categories that we just went over. We're not going to go through each one of these departments individualized tonight. But what we want to point out is you'll see that we had savings on a couple of areas. This is definitely where more people coming in and paying towards the pools. Their expenses are pretty stagnant. Chlorine cost increases, utility cost increases impact it. But overall, our pool, our community center, it's not getting bigger. And so as we get more and more people coming in, it helps offset those cost increases. When we do see increases is, again, based on our community survey over the last few years, residents want additional pools open for extended hours in the season. So for the last 2 years, I believe, if that's correct, Cody, DCC was open for the last 2 years, extended length of season at regular hours or less adjusted hours. We've tried to get adults to fill the lifeguard posts for those timings, and working with Premier Aquatics has helped make that happen for us. But now based on, again, the survey results, we are adding additional pools. Everybody doesn't want to come to just the DCC. So we are budgeting for East Lake and the Upper Villages pools to also have extended hours in addition to the DCC pool. I'm looking at Cody and he's shaking his head to make sure I get it right. So that is where you see any increases in those is just based on adding additional hours for that. And then again, because some of our people like words, other people like graphs, this is just a graph that has the overall categories broken into what percentage impact it has on the individual sections and assessment. So we're getting near the end of the Master Association part. So just a couple more, I think, slides here, but we're going to talk a little bit about the project fund, surplus funds, that sort of item we kind of briefly touched on earlier. So again, when we have surplus funds from prior year savings, the board is able to decide on whether or not based again, a lot on survey feedback. So please, when you get those every year, each and every comment is read. So the more constructive ones with ideas are awesome. Those really get utilized. The other ones, thank you for your comment. But some of that feedback is things that people want to see. For example, some sort of shade around Ochre Lake. So in the 2025, and it's under the capital improvements line item in your handout, projected or proposed, not approved, right? But proposed projects include a shade structure or structures, depending on how it works out, for Ochre Lake. There are irrigation system upgrades for some of our oldest native areas, Millerton swale repairs, and Millerton basin improvements. If you live on Millerton, I hope you're listening. It really is going to happen. The contract's been signed. We're just waiting for the weather to break next spring so we can send you all a schedule of actual dates for this is occurring. An additional Kubota, because we're so big, the guys, whenever they're trying to empty the trash and the pet waste stations, having them go down and carry it, it saves so much time, you have no idea. And plus it helps push snow. We have pool shade structures for Brookside and Highland that's being proposed. And then our final year of our 3-year tree replacement catch-up plan is proposed in this as well. So each year we put these in there, and then the NAC, if you're part of the Neighborhood Advisory Committee of homeowners, the board will say, okay, we want you to look at these projects. Please let us know what is most feasible. Help us decide what some of the priorities you think they should be. And then based on that homeowner feedback, the board will then make the ultimate decision as to what projects do and don't happen or get pushed to another year kind of thing. So that's really exciting about what that is. Also, for your surplus fund, prior year surplus, the funds for these projects come from prior year surplus. So when you see the capital improvements line item, that's not added to what your 2025 assessment is. But because you've already paid money that we were able to save previously, so that's paying for that. But we've also put in the 2025 budget just close to 159,000 of prior year surplus to help minimize the impact on your assessment increase of some of these things that we just reviewed broadly. All right, so those are all really key, important areas. Some of the other things that attribute to some of the increases, of course, are added common areas. And some of the ones that are most familiar with everyone, we have water course phases 1 and 2. There are phase 3 and 4 planned for the next couple of years. The Cove House was just opened. I don't know if you had a chance to go, but the pumpkin walk was amazing. There was like, I don't know, 5 million people coming through that line, getting candy. It's like, holy Hannah, it was awesome. I mean, and adults dressed up too. It was really fun. And yes, we gave them candy too when they came by, but it was just really a good time at the Cove House. Playhouse Park is new, and it's a great one for kids to play in and climb on, and there's swings, places for parents to sit, there's picnic tables. It's really nice. It's over there off of, Bingham. It's off of that last street, currently the last street in Daybreak, over by the Bullfrog hot tubs, kind of over in that area. And then we've had a number of Cascade Village, Paseo areas, and other passive park common areas that we've had. So all of those new additions increase, landscape costs and things like that. So they're great new items. If you haven't gone and visited any of these, please take time. I believe on our website, it shows the locations of all of our amenities. So please do not be like me and just stay in your house. Get out, go to the other side of Daybreak, whether it's this side or that side, depending on where you live. Really take an opportunity to enjoy where you live. It's really a great place. So, and very well managed, I might say. But anyway, I'm taking those giggles as laughing with me and not at me. Okay, good. Thank you. And then just a high level overview again. I'm not going to go into great depth again, but some of the key areas that impacted our 2025 assessment proposed increase. Again, our reserve contribution going up, the insurance premiums, the taxes, and vandalism. You know, $11,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but that's up 900% from, you know, the 2024. So the 2025 number is up 900% because we know, even as diligent as we were in trying to code things, there were some things that slipped through. And so again, you can help with that. That is a cost you guys can help us lower as the years go by. And, you know, on-site services went up a little bit, about 11%. Insurance was about 52% overall. So, you know, it's just, again, every line item impacts it, whether it increased or decreased, but those are just some of the areas we highlighted. So what does all of that mean? So all of that means a $5.50 per month increase for the Master Association. So your assessment breakdown is $111 per month for the base assessment. Then the $33 for the CenturyLink Intranet stayed the same. So your total monthly 2025 proposed monthly assessment is $144, still to be billed quarterly at $432. So the next slide, one of the questions we get a lot when we talk about the increases and thing is, you know, is there ever a cap? You know, how much have you gone up? You know, I've lived here 5 years and there's always an increase. And so yes, prices do not stay stagnant, even when the economy isn't going crazy, right? So whatever increases you face in your individual households, the association faces very similar ones, if not on a larger scale. But this is a great view from the beginning of time, when assessment started in 2008 to the 2025 proposed. Overall, for the lifespan of the association, the average annual increase has only been 3.49%, or $3.72. Yes, 2 of the years for COVID, 2021 and 2022, there was no increases. But overall, because when we're looking at our budget, we don't just look at next year, we're looking at a 5-year plan, what's coming online, what other, any large amenities that might be coming online. And so what the board and the Budget and Finance Committee and management, what we try to do is look at that and figure out what can we do to stabilize increases over that period, so that you don't do this with your assessments. It's not going up and down, or, you know, you get large increases. The Master Association is able to take that broad look because the association is being built and constructed over a 30-year period. So we're 20 years in. So, you know, we're able to do things the smaller associations or the BSAs aren't able to do, because you have a building, you're done, there you go. It's just too much of a quick turnaround. So we're able to look at it from a long-term perspective and try to plan to make your assessment increases a little bit easier along the way. So that's always fun. So the next section that we're going to get into is the benefited service areas, but we can stop for a moment if there's some Master Association questions that you want to ask. I was going to do both questions at the end, but it might be easier if you're just in a Master Association. Everyone pays the Master Association. Not everyone pays the benefited service area. So are there any Master Association questions now that you have online? Nope. Okay. All right. And are there any Master Association questions so far in the audience that hasn't been asked? Great. I'm doing an awesome job. Okay. Yes, I find myself hilarious. Thank you, Mrs. Akia. So now we're going to go over into our benefited service areas. And you may not know what a benefited service area is. For the majority, benefited service areas are a group of townhomes a builder or builders have built and want to have special services that are for those homes only. And the benefited service areas are created by a special supplemental that is recorded and creates them as a unique individual service area and outlines what those services are. Most of those services for the townhomes are really pretty similar. It's landscaping, it's exterior building maintenance, roof, painting, Some fences, some not fences. They're all a little different, but for the majority, their major expenses are very similar. I also have John here. John is the dedicated benefited service area manager, so he knows a lot of the details. I'm going to go over more of a high-level overview for everyone at this meeting. And I think it's important to note that John has held a service area committee meeting for every service area that has a committee. For those of you who may not know what that is, the supplementals allow the homeowners in a particular benefited service area, I'm just going to call them BSAs moving forward, to elect other homeowners in their service area to be a committee. And what that committee's role is to review the budget, they got copies of the landscape RFP, copies of the contracts, all of that stuff, so that they can make recommendations to the board of directors to approve. If there's some service level changes that may be requested or needed, they are able to make those suggestions. Depending on what that is, it might require a vote of the homeowners in that benefited service area. So it's not just a couple of people making that type of a recommendation to the board to change, like to reduce or increase services that you didn't buy into. We have to check the documents depending on what it is. And then usually it's around 65–75% of the owners of that service area would have to vote in favor of certain type changes of service levels. But the service area committees are a vital way for the homeowners, residents within those service areas to be a part of this process and be a part of the decision making. So it's a very, very important role, and we appreciate all of that. Each service area has its own budget. So these are our current service areas. I believe there's 13 of them there. And again, they consist, the majority, or 9 of those are townhome benefited service areas, and the other 4 are other service areas. So they are special services for certain single family homes, like snow pushing for the cottage courts is a service area. We also have the lake and the island that get services not to their homes, but to a specific component that is just reserved for those service areas. And so this is just kind of an overview of all of them. This next screen, it's a lot of information on one screen. But again, what this is basically they have much smaller budgets than the master does, right? They have a lot less things to maintain and take care of and requirements than the Master Association does. And these are a general overview of their sections of their budgets and financials. So you can see that some of them found some savings in some areas and in their operational cost, whereas others had various increases. And so where they might have had increases in repairs and maintenance, as an example, you have new buildings come online, so you have to be prepared. The warranties are now running out of some of them. You have to be able to make gutter repairs and things like that. So we have to have money in there for that. Contract services, the landscaping services is the majority of those. So when you go through here, there's a lot of general components that impact all of them. Some of the key elements within these budgets are in their landscape extras or landscape repair line item. That's where the mulch is, that's where your tree replacement is, that's where their plant replacements are, all of those kind of things. And those are very, very vital and important because this is their yards, right? So you're in a townhome and your assessment is to take care of your yard. And you want mulch, so we have to budget for mulch. And so what John works with the service area committees on is creating phases. And depending on how quickly your buildings were put up, some are easier to create phases versus others. And so when we can phase in mulch, as an example, you do 1/3 of the complex every year, as an example. It helps spread the cost of that over a certain amount of years versus all of it in one lump. So those are just some of the general costs and expenses that impact all of the homeowners within there. And of course, in their next slide, we're going to talk about their reserves, insurance, and utilities. So the utilities also includes an increase for the projected 18% electric costs. Some of the service areas in addition to having culinary water expenses, have secondary water cost. Some of them have not yet been billed for the secondary water costs. It's an annual assessment based on number of shares owned, not on usage. The reason that the service areas haven't been yet billed for that is the secondary water company is still creating GIS maps so that they can identify exactly what is landscape area versus we don't want you to pay a share cost for sidewalks. So it takes a lot to get to that little bit of a minutia. So currently right now, the master, it's just all wrapped up into the master. Some have been broken out, but not all. So that's an important area to talk about. And of course, the reserve studies. So all of the benefited service areas, BSAs, got updated reserve studies this year as well, or a couple of them got their first reserve study that was done because they came online in the middle of that 3-year cycle period. When that happens, we look for the most similar product and the most current reserve study contribution amount recommended, and that's where their initial budget reserve contribution comes from. As we've already went over ad nauseum on the Master Association, all of the reserves factor in what's gone on from the original or the last 2021 site visit study to the 2024. Every one of them has been significantly impacted by the reserve study increases. And again, I'm not going to go over everything, but it's imperative that both your fund balance and your annual contribution are set at levels to achieve a goal of getting to at least that 70%. Their reserve studies are still working on the percent funded method, right? And so we had to look at that, and some of them, the increases were just extremely significant. So we try to phase it out over 3 years to spread the impact to the next updated study. But you have to be careful. If we keep spreading it out, we're never going to catch up, right? So as you can see on this slide, oh, thank you. As you can see on this slide, you see this, the new study that's supposed to start for 2025. Recommended fund balance is, as an example for the first one, is $364,427. What's expected to be in their reserve fund bank account is $125,000. That's a huge discrepancy to make up. And when you look at our service areas, we have one service area that has 24 units, and our largest service area currently has 133 units. And some of them are still growing, some of them are built out. And so you can imagine if you are in, I'm looking for my 24 unit one, Department 13 Imagination. That's my smallest one, right? And so look at their discrepancy. Imagine 24 people trying to help make that up, okay? So it really has a significant role and impact on the proposed increases, and they're not easy to swallow. Also, that impacted them, same insurance increases, right? So not only do you have our reserves, but they were impacted by insurance increases. Some of the service areas had several claims, so their impact by insurance was even worse than the normal ones, right? Because as we do claims, the insurance company's risk exposure is now growing, right? And then, of course, the utilities, which we talked briefly about. And so knowing all of that information, oh, sorry, before I get to that part, the other benefited service areas that are not townhomes, we have the island, which does have some areas that are just island only, the common areas and benches and a dock and a little pavilion, among a few. They got a little reserve study as well. However, based on recommendations from management and the service area committee, the board has agreed to remove one of their line items, which was a water assessment to help maintain Ochre Lake water. So we have all agreed that that is no longer something that they should be paying for in addition to everything else. So for 2025, that line item is coming off and they'll actually see a small decrease in their assessment, even though they had to increase because of their reserves. The removal of the one expense helped offset that for them. We have and that was the island. Did I say lake by accident? Did I say, okay, that was for island. Lake Village takes care of, they have their Waterside Club Pavilion. That's all, and that's shared by 300 plus unit owners to help share that one. Snow pushing is our cottage courts where we push snow. Remember, we do not remove snow. We push it from one inconvenient location to what we hope is a less inconvenient location. Also, do not throw away your shovel. We will push snow on the BSAs, whether it's a cottage court or a townhome, after the event, right? You do not pay to have them come back and continue. So it's up to the individual unit owner. If a wind drift comes, you might have to push it out of your way again. If there's a little excess salt that maybe it spilled out a little bit, you might have to help sweep it off so it doesn't damage your sidewalk. So yes, service pushing is included in your service area assessment, but it's not continual. It's a one-time shot. Individual homeowners are responsible. If there's ice buildup, something melts after we've been there, it's your responsibility to add salt to it to make sure that there's no trip and fall hazards. And then let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, and then our newest one, there are some, not all, of the new destination paired homes that was put into a service area just to do some minor landscaping. So that's kind of what the other area is just anything that's not a townhome, but is still a service area. So what does all of that mean for the service areas? This is the projected increases for each of the service areas. The least is a recommended $11.50 per month increase. The most expensive is $55.50 per month increase. So hopefully, while none of that is pleasant to hear, if you are in a service area, I hope your takeaway is that at least you have some comfort knowing that none of these numbers were created easily or without thought and care. Additionally, John is meeting with the board next week, the beginning of the week, to look again, to look at the reserve funding. Is there anything we missed where there could be additional savings that won't put you at jeopardy of being underfunded, right? So we're going to go through it again. But right now, the proposed increases are as noted on the slides. If something is found next week, when you get your annual budget notice increase letter, you might, there may be a reduction. I do not expect these numbers to change. All right, I'm sad to say, but we want to make sure that through all of the reviews that's already happened with the service area committees, the budget and finance committee, the board's already looked at it, management's looked at it. We're going to do it again just to make sure we didn't miss anything. As we know how difficult this is going to be for a lot of our homeowners, and it's not something that we have, like I said, done lightly. And that ends our 2025 budget town hall presentation. Do we have any service area homeowners that have any questions about the service areas? No? Do we have any BSA owners here that has any questions? Okay. So I guess without any other questions, no new master questions or anything came in? All right. Well, I want to thank you for spending your evening with me. And hopefully you enjoyed some of it. But anyway, I appreciate you being here. The association is you, so we can't do it without you. So thank you for participating.